Good morning. It's nice and early in Berlin. Happen to be up early today, so I have a little bit of extra time before the day kicks off. So I figured I'd do a little video about setting up Shadow-cljs and Reagent from scratch. So I'm not going to use any templates, anything like that. I'm going to try to stick to a fairly vanilla setup. I might mention at the end a couple things that I tend to do in my setup, but yeah, we'll try to keep it fairly regular. So my reagent project. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Create a deps Eden file, and then while we're at it, let's maybe also set up a couple directories. We're going to want source. I think we also want resources public. Yeah, that's probably the main stuff. And then we're also going to need a Shadow-cljs.eden. So yeah, we'll be filling those in as we go along. So let's start with the deps Eden, right? So I'm going to put source and resources on the class path. Source is on there by default. Resources is a fairly common place to put non-source file resources that you still want to be accessible, and in particular HTML and compiled JavaScript is gonna end up in there. And then we need some deps. Let's, for good measure, even though they're pulled in by some of these other dependencies, I'm going to put an explicit dependency. Where are we now? 110.3? Closure. Releases. 110.3, yes. So closure, we are 110.3. Going to depend on closure script. Closure script.org. 110.866. And then we want Shadow-cljs, but I guess I'll already try to do this properly-ish by using a def alias, and then we say extra deps, since this is a development dependency. Although I guess if it's a front-end dep, fully like strictly front-end only, it doesn't make so much of a difference, because all that really matters is in the end is the compiled JavaScript. But if you do have a front-end back-end dep, keeping these front-end compile time or def time dependencies separate kind of makes your back-end deployment a little leaner, which can be nice. And then reagent. Now Shadow, actually, I mean, I don't even strictly need this. If you're using Shadow from npm, I even believe this is kind of optional, but I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, this is a little different from, so like, okay, there's kind of different ways to run Shadow. If you read the official docs, they will run it via npm or yarn, like of the npm dependency, even though that internally just spawns a JVM with you know, it's still a closure dependency, it's just packaged via npm. I like to start a REPL myself and then start Shadow inside there, so I tend to have some helpers to do that I just kind of copy from project to project. But like I said, I kind of want to try to show a relatively vanilla setup, which means that at least initially we're going to try to follow the official docs. So let's let's go through this. Shadow-cljs. We want to say that our dependencies are managed by deps. I believe that is the syntax. Or no, is it just deps true? Yes, okay. Yeah, I'm going to try, like, I just, tend to just look at what I did at the previous project, right? But I'm going to try to just stick to the docs and see what we find. Yeah, so to use this, set deps true. And we can actually, instead of just setting it true, we can also set some aliases, which I'm gonna set to def. And then yeah, we're going to need some builds. And so the builds, my builds. Come on, show me how to configure a build. Just give me an example. Okay, right. Yeah, so let's do the same thing. Call this build app, and we say target browser. And then yeah, I think we want to specify a main eventually. Either through modules or otherwise. Main, yeah, target. Yeah, this seems like, okay. This is what I want. Let's see, close one, close two, I think that's it. So these output there and asset path, this is standard ClojureScript stuff. These are actually ClojureScript compiler flags that you can also find when you're using other tools. Output there is where the compiled files will be written. And then asset path is basically what gets prepended to the URLs to load those files. So this kind of needs to be relative to whatever you are serving from your web server. So in the case, like if resources public is kind of the web root where we are serving files from, then and JS files go to /out inside that, then yes, by this path is /out. My main namespace, what do I call this? Capybara. Just to give it the child a name. So capybara.cljs. Yes. And let's just put a JS alert in here. We made it. Now, when you're doing ClojureScript, you need some web server that, at least when you're doing it from the browser. And so Shadow has that built in here, DevTools. Or is it something with HTTP? What's it called? Okay, let's start from the top again. Development HTTP server. So it started by default. I just wanna, okay, yes. Just And this might be exactly what the default is, but never hurts to be explicit. Also 8000 is kind of a common port. I tend to just sort of give my projects random ports so that if one project is already running and I want to start the other project, that it doesn't like bark at me. Yeah, let's start there. Are we going to use npm or yarn? I am talking to myself, so you can't answer me. I still don't know why I should use one over the other. I'm just going to use npm, I guess. And I believe in npm it's install save dev, right? Yes. Save dev Shadow-cljs. So this should have created a package. Ah, okay. No package JSON. Let's try that again. Okay, now we have a package JSON. And we also are going to need React, and I think you also need separately React DOM. Okay, seems reasonable. Now we can do yeah, for instance, this one. And we'll see, probably still going to be missing some stuff, but just kind of going to see what happens now. Configuring build, compiling. And so it started a couple different things. So this is the port I picked, right? So this is actually where our app should be available. We'll look at that in the browser in a second. This is something that like sort of Shadow's own UI, where it tells you a bit about what's happening. You can sort of inspect some stuff. I think you can even tap values and have them show up here. Okay, so this is the def HTTP server. So, okay, it's serving stuff, but it is missing its index.html, which is correct. We don't have an index.html yet. So we're going to put that under resources public index.html. Let's try to put a somewhat semantically valid HTML bit here. Okay, does that work? It does not. Okay, so what is the, how do we, So, okay, def HTTP, is that relative to the class path or relative to the file system, to the root of the project? Okay, I need to tell it that it's from, so I'm telling it class path public, so oh yeah, we have a bunch of stuff here now. Let's actually walk through that. So yeah, node modules, we're not gonna look too much at that yet. That, you know, node tends to pull in half the internet. That is okay. Or at least that is how it is. Yeah, so we looked at our package.json, which contains React now. Okay, and I guess Shadow created that public directory, but I actually don't want a top-level directory. Like the way I like to lay out my stuff is that resources on the class path, and inside resources there's a public directory. So resources in the class path because I put it on there here. So the fact that the resources over here is in this paths, and then here I say class path public, and here I have a resources/public directory, should mean that it can find that index.html. Let's try that again. Sure, my Shadow tries to reload Shadow-cljs Eden. Like it reloads everything else, so maybe this restart wasn't really necessary. But it doesn't hurt either, and it's still a tiny project. It's not like it is that costly to just quickly restart it. Okay, so now we have hello world, but it's not loading our app yet. That is also on us. So we should here somewhere find a, where did it put it? No, main.js. Yeah, resources public out main.js. So I believe that this is what we should be. Yeah, so this is the main namespace where it all starts. And then at the end, it's loading our capybara file. So in index.html, and these tend to go at the bottom of the body part. Script. Source, right? Out main.js. We made it. All right. And so now I can actually start doing stuff here. JS console.log hello mom. And if I save this file, you saw a glimpse here of the let me just put them side by side. No. Yes. And then open a browser console. Let's maybe put this one at the bottom. But so yeah, here's our log statement. And I'm gonna do one more thing, which is kind of typical index.html instead of this hello world. Or actually, you know, we can keep that, but let's put a div here. ID is app, for instance. And in there, we are going to render our app. So now I can say require reagent core as either R or reagent. I guess I'll be explicit now, but if you're using this, like if this really is the foundation of your app and you're using it in almost every namespace, it's not unreasonable to call it R. But I tend to reserve these one-letter aliases for like the, you know, the 1 or 2 or maybe 3 most commonly used libraries in a project, and for the rest try to be a little bit more explicit. Reagent oh, okay, yeah, see, and here like I had like the tendency to so okay, I could just save this and let it reload. It's taken a long time now, but I guess it's just including those things. Yeah, like it probably had to compile a whole lot of extra stuff because I'm pulling in reagent now. Second time around it should be faster. Yeah. So that's one workflow, right? You can just save this and just let Shadow do its thing. But so I don't even have a REPL right now. I can't just eval this. Now Shadow does, if I'm not mistaken, start an nREPL server here, nREPL server start at 37925. So I should be able to say CIDER connect CLJS localhost, yeah, and it knows which nREPLs are available. So and this happens to be a shadow, but I don't know if because it shouldn't be asking me all of this stuff because everything's already initialized. Like the fact that it's asking me what kind of ClojureScript REPL is this kind of implies that it's going to want to do some kind of initialization routine, which I don't want. Okay, how about I do a regular CIDER connect? Okay, connection established. Let's see. So I have a REPL here, but I guess it doesn't realize that this is a ClojureScript REPL. Also, yeah, it's complaining that it's missing some CIDER and other middleware. But okay, for regular, like plain eval stuff, that should be fine. Let me close this buffer. CIDER connect. Let's try to go through these prompts and see what it actually does. I don't know what the difference is between shadow and shadow select. Oh, maybe shadow select is actually the one I want. Okay. No, still doesn't like it. I mean, I can cheat by changing this namespace to be in closure mode. No, it still doesn't like it. Yeah, great. Apparently not trivial to get a REPL going. Okay, so I'm going to stop shadow here, the one that we started via npm, and see what happens if I try to just use vanilla CIDER stuff, CIDER jack in ClojureScript. Shadow app. Right. So in this case, this might be a, so yeah, now CIDER did the startup of the process. CIDER and REPL's there, but the shadow middleware is not there. Now this might also be, so in this case, yeah, so okay, let me create a dir locals. When you're doing Emacs stuff, it's always useful to have a dir local. So this is where you can set project specific Emacs variables. And in particular, I often set this one to say like, okay, I actually want CIDER to start with this extra alias, which refers to this alias here, which means that we're going to have Shadow-cljs on the class path. So let's close this. Let's go back to our code. Let's reload this, and then jack in other. Does the shadow docs mention CIDER? Emacs CIDER. Yeah. this is supposed to work. Oh, actually, wait, how is it starting the process now? Okay. That doesn't seem like the right init form. Okay, so you see how much fun this is. Let me show you how I tend to do it in ClojureScript apps. Maybe this one. No. Maybe this one. No. Where is it? This one should have. Yes. Okay. So yeah, let's do a tiny bit more setup. So let's go back to our project. Go back to deps Eden. Here in this def alias, we're also going to put an extra paths def. So in def times, we want to put this extra directory on the class path, and there we put a user CLJ. User CLJ is a file that gets loaded in the REPL whenever your REPL starts, where you can sort of put extra logic that you want to have available in that default REPL namespace. I tend to put a helper macro here, JIT. What is this for? The thing is, like, I could put a bunch of requires here because we're going to be using a bunch of code here, Shadow-cljs DevTools, server runtime, etc. I could require all those things here. The reason I don't like to do that are twofold. One is it slows down your REPL start time because it means that before you get to the point where you have a REPL and can evaluate anything, whatever you're requiring there needs to get loaded first. And so that really slows down your time to REPL, and I don't want that. I want to be able to start a REPL and it should be up and running as quickly as possible, and whatever I want to load after that, I can decide then. The other reason is, especially when you start requiring some of your own namespaces here, you might have other namespaces with helper functions. Suppose you have a typo, some kind of syntax error in that namespace. Now your REPL just no longer boots because it's trying to load that namespace as soon as the REPL boots before you even get to evaluating anything, and it's just going to fail, it's going to spit out an error, and you're going to have a horrible feedback loop trying to fix that. So this is why I'm using this little JIT trick just in time, right? So this basically, when I say JIT and a fully qualified symbol here, this is going to, at the point where this code gets executed, load this namespace and find this var. And so that's why there's a double deref here. One is for the var, and then I guess the var contains an atom. Now you can also call vars as if they are functions. That's what's happening here. So this is just sort of a way of kind of deferring the load time. We called our app. Yeah, the rest should be fine. And then let's look at some other dear locals. So yeah, this is the other stuff that I kind of copy from project to project. Let me actually do it like this. No, how do I split window below? Oh, underscore? No. Okay, here we are. Yeah, so the other thing is I want CIDER to like not ask me questions. I want it to know what I expect in a certain project. So I'm going to tell it that I wanted to use Clojure CLI, and not, for instance, Shadow for like starting the process. And then, yeah, we're just gonna tell it, okay, you know, use a custom initialization routine for your ClojureScript REPL, and this is how the ClojureScript REPL gets initialized, where user go is not even necessary. So now one thing to point out here, when you're editing this dir locals, is that it doesn't get picked up until you reload a file. So for instance here, if I evaluate CIDER default CLJS REPL, check what that variable is, it's going to tell me nil. But now when I say find alternate file, just, you know, open the file again basically, and now I do the same thing, it's going to tell me, it disappeared immediately, but it's going to tell me custom. So that's something to watch out for. Maybe also a few words about what this dir locals actually looks like what's all this noise with this nil. What this actually is supposed to look like is that this is, so there's an outer list containing pairs. The first element of the pair is the name of a major mode. Then there are dot of pairs, so you put the dot pair there. And then you have a list again of pairs, which are your variable value. You can also use a special eval name if you want to like run some code. And so this is gonna then run, these variables will get set whenever you open a file that has as a default mode the closure mode. If you put nil here in the mode name, it's just going to use it for every file. So that's what dir locals does, and I tend to have that in the bottom of my project. That's, you know, it's an Emacs thing, but it's a very useful thing. So now I should actually be able to say CIDER check in ClojureScript. And so this, you know, like it's a tiny bit more setup, but it gives you like so much more control. I find it so much easier to follow what's happening. Did I not call it? Oh, start CLJS. Oh, and I actually do this only starts it. I'd still need another one. To actually start the REPL. App. And then, okay, last try. Connection established. Now while I'm here, I'm going to put one more helper function in that user CLJ file, which I always tend to do, which is this browse. User browse. And so what port did I use here? 4828. So like I said, I tend to have like a different port for every single project, and then I have this browse helper in the user of every project. And what does it show? How can I view a register? So the B register contains this code user browse, and I have a helper bound to comma, which runs the command corgi CIDER pprint register. So basically what this does is, you know, when I say comma and then a letter, it's going to find the Emacs register with that letter name. In this case, for instance, comma comma B is going to find the B register. I already in my init.el put user browse in that B register, and every single project I have this browse helper which knows exactly how to open that project. Long story short, in every single project that I work on, I can start a REPL and say comma comma B, and it loads the project. So with all of that out of the way, I believe we might be able to start evaluating some code. Okay, yeah, missing nREPL middleware. I guess that is the last piece of the puzzle. If you do it like this, you need to also tell CIDER that it should add the shadow specific middleware. Let me see. Sure, I have this in a bunch of places. Yeah, for instance. Yeah, and so I was kind of hoping not to get too far into this stuff, but I don't know how to set up a project in any other way anymore. Maybe someone can enlighten me. But I do like this, you know, like it means there's only one JVM. It means everything started from CIDER. It means I have control over how the closure script compilation starts, etc. So basically what we're saying here is add Shadow-cljs DevTools server and REPL middleware to the list variables CIDER, check-in, and REPL middlewares. What does that do? When you reload this, so your locals is reloaded, close my REPL, and then CIDER check in CLJS once more. And you should already see it in that comment that shows up there, but I guess we can also see it. Come on. Let's have a look at the REPL. Okay, so yeah, Shadow uses Undertow for its internal HTTP server, and that one is a bit noisy on the logging. We could, for instance, set up logback to configure that and turn down the noise a bit. Point is, do we finally have a working REPL? We do. Okay, this is another thing that's a little annoying with Shadow's REPL. When you try to evaluate something and there's no, so like it needs to be connected to a browser or Node or whatever, like some JavaScript runtime, to be able to evaluate anything. If that's not the case yet, and you know, like say you're just working in your buffer, you're trying to, you know, like evaluate stuff, and it's just giving you nil, right? Which is like, if you would like try to print something, it would give you nil too. So you're like, that looks okay, but it's actually not okay. It's actually just not doing anything. It's just going to tell you, oh, I'm not, no available JS runtime. I'm not connected. So I think this is really annoying. I think Shadow should just, you know, throw an exception so that it actually pops up and says like, hey, you know, I can't do that. Okay, but long story short, let's close a couple tabs. Do this comma comma B again. Oh. Well, won't do it. Okay, let's. Oh, because I don't have a. I only did a check in CLJS. So I didn't do the Jenkins CLJ and CLJS, so I can't evaluate any closure code right now. I can only evaluate closure script code. But that's fine. Okay, let's just manually open it. So that's why this browse helper doesn't work. What was it for 828? Right. So, and now we can evaluate stuff. Okay, so to wrap this up, because we were going to do reagent, right? So this should only take a minute. Let's say we have, you know, my first component. And I guess, yeah, it doesn't need to take any props yet. We'll just say h1, it's rendering. And then we need to find the root element that we're going to render in. So say get element by ID app. So that's that app element that that I created in our index HTML. This guy. And then we're going to say reagent DOM render and pass it some hiccup to render. And the component needs to render in. And, okay, I didn't evaluate this. There, it's rendering. And I guess now I could also say def state reagent atom, I don't know, just as an example. And let's maybe say, you know, section something like that. So we just want to show what the current number is, and then we say button on click. We want to swap the state, update I, and increment it. This is kind of hello world of a reagent app. Let's just put plus on there as a caption. Just going to save that. Doesn't like it. Defend did not conform to spec because this should be a def, not a defend. Save that again. All right, and we have a counter. All right, so I hope that that made sense as a reagent from scratch. Didn't really manage to do it fully the vanilla way, but we have a working setup. I hope it's helpful for some. Last step, what I tend to do at this point is kind of add everything to git ignore that I don't want to check in. Of course, there's also versions that I just kind of tend to copy from project to project, but it's actually okay to just look at, you know, what Git is planning to do, and then tell it which one it should not add. Package lock, I guess opinions vary on whether that should get checked in. Since this is more an app versus a library, I think I will check it in. This will also contain compiled code, so we don't need to check that in. Okay, let's see. If I add everything now, what does that look like? Yeah, I think that's all our stuff and none of the generated stuff except the package.lock, which is generated, but we do want to check that in. Git commit my reagent project first commit, boom. Here, and I'll even put this on GitHub so folks can find the code if they want to. Yeah, I'll stick a README on there later with a link to the YouTube video. And that's it. Thanks for watching.